Let's talk about SSH. And we already know SSH is a network protocol that enables a user to securely access and interact with another computer or device over TCP/IP. And the good thing is, we will just reuse our Telnet whiteboard session from the previous video. So what I'm gonna do is I will cross out Telnet and instead we're gonna replace it with SSH. There. What else? This is already an SSH server, so it should be listening on TCP port 22, not 23 anymore. I will remove these arrows and this arrow as well, and let's test. Okay, so from the client side, also again from the client side like Telnet, you can use the terminal if you're using Mac OS or Linux as your PC or client, or you can use terminal emulation program such as PuTTY or Secure CRT. Okay, but assuming we are using a Linux client as well, instead of Telnet command, we will use SSH, but it's not just Telnet. It's not just SSH followed by the destination IP address or fully qualified domain. You need to also add the user. Yes, it's either you use -l and the username such as root. Okay, this is possible, this is valid, or you can do this root, which is the username. We're not using L anymore or -l anymore. We just simply add the username followed by @ then followed by the IP address. In this case, the destination, our SSH server is 10.0.0.100 listening on port 22, which is the default TCP port of an SSH server. All right, now it will ask for your password, or before that, just like all TCP application or TCP based application, it will do the three-way handshake, and once this is complete, it will now establish a connection. Okay, and once the session is established, it will prompt the user a password. Okay, so this password, you need to input this. This is the password of the user that you specify, which is the root user. Okay, now assuming that your password is correct, you are now authenticated, and you can now access this server. Since this is a Linux server, you can now execute or use some of the native Linux commands such as ls, top, pwd, uname, etc. Again, SSH server is providing us text-based communication interface. Okay, and this is allowed remotely, same as what we did in Telnet. But speaking of Telnet, Telnet has all of these disadvantages. Okay, let's talk about the advantages of SSH. So I will remove Telnet, and this instead I will add SSH followed by advantages. So what are the advantages of SSH over Telnet? First, it's no longer considered unsecure. Okay, it is now secure. And the reason why it is considered secure because it's no longer using plain text as we send our data over the network. This is now encrypted. And Telnet, the reason why it's unsecure, the reason why it's using plain text, because there was no encryption. Now what we're gonna do is we're just going to remove no, because SSH is encrypted. It's using encryption mechanisms such as AES. Okay, now it says here Telnet can use password only, meaning without username. SSH will always ask you for username and password. Well, actually, not always, but if you're using password enabled SSH connectivity, it will ask you for user. And what do you mean? What do you mean it's not always asking for password? All right, we'll go on that later. Let's talk about first what's the effect on this attacker, on this hacker, the SSH advantages. All right, so since we are sending traffic all encrypted, in this case from client to SSH, these are all encrypted now. See? All encrypted. When this guy do the sniffing or the packet sniffing, it will no longer be successful. Well, he can capture some of the data, but he cannot read it because it's all encrypted. Okay, so in short, man-in-the-middle attacks will not be a success. It will not be able to capture the files as well as the sensitive data. So meaning all of these will be prevented using SSH application. Now, regarding the option or the other option instead of password-based authentication, we have also key pair. And how does it work? All right, from the SSH server, you can generate a key pair. If we do that, what will happen is it will generate a key pair. Hold on. Generate key pair, or let's say generate keys, and the pair will be named as, so this is the first key. I will name it public key. Okay, and the second key will be the private key. Now take note, private key, this is owned by our SSH server. The public key, well, as its name says, public, this can be shared to clients or to anyone. Now, here's what we're gonna do. You see this client here? The client will be using the public key. Public key. And this is what it will use for authentication. Yes, we will not use the password. We will SSH to the server using this public key. Well, what are the advantages over password? Well, for me, personally, it's more secured because it's less prone to brute force attack, because it's very difficult, like 100 times more difficult to guess a public key versus a password. All right, last, this is also quite important. I will move this because we need space. All right, this is quite important about SSH. So SSH, we already know that it's listening to port 22. Yes, so SSH is listening to TCP port 22. Now take note, TCP port 22 is SSH. It provides text-based communication interface to remotely access SSH server. Okay, now it's not only this capability SSH server can offer. Again, text-based communication. If you enable SSH, there are other two applications, or I would say two features that is also enabled. One of these is SFTP. Okay, SFTP stands for Secure FTP, or sometimes some people call it SSH FTP because it's using SSH protocols, which is listening in on port 22. So SFTP, just like FTP, but this time it is secured. Okay, so technically this is just a secure version of it's a secure version of FTP. Okay, the other feature that is part of SSH or available in SSH is what we call SCP. Stands for Secure Copy or SSH Copy. This allows us to secure copying of files between local and remote devices. So basically, this is a secure version of the copy command.